Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Charleston Conference session, Wielding the Power of Trustworthy Information, How Librarians Help Build Information Literacy. I'm Meg Quinn, Senior Marketing Manager at EBSCO Information Services, and I'm joined today by John Burns, Electronic Resources Librarian at Utah Tech University, and Andrew Walsh, the Instruction and Assessment Librarian at Sinclair Community College. John is going to start us off by explaining how he teaches researchers the importance of searching by specific journals. So I'll turn it over to him. John?
Hi, everyone, and thank you for that intro. So let me get to our first slide here. So yeah, my name is John Burns. I'm the Electronic Resources Librarian at Utah Tech University. We're on the southernmost part of Utah on the Arizona border. We're about 35 minutes from Zion National Park. And I'm going to talk about today as we teach the librarians here, including myself, as we teach information literacy to students, there's a lot of foundational knowledge that needs to be put in place, that a lot of our students don't understand certain aspects of the research process. And I'm going to focus today on helping them understand what are the seminal or important journals in their field, not only so they can get familiar with them as a student as they conduct research, write research papers, projects like that, but also to help them prepare to hopefully utilize these long into their career to stay up and current on what's in their field. But a lot of times we find that, especially with undergrads, they don't often make connection between articles they find in a database or online and the publications that they reside in. They often don't even really understand what a journal is. To some degree, I've kind of put my finger on that things have moved digitally, so they're not really looking through print periodicals like a lot of us old timers did when we were going to school. Everything is digital now, so it's hard for them, I think, because of that, to make the connection that this actually resides in a journal. So I'm going to talk about those, how we help them understand what a journal is, and then how to find them, and how to really get familiar with the ones that are best for their field. So the best way I've found to do that is to start helping them look at it from a title perspective. So really the best place to begin is a Google search for, I have 3 examples here: best academic journals for oncology, or top journals in business, or the best scholarly journals for nursing. And Google actually does a very good job of displaying a screen. I'll also show some examples in just a minute, listing what are the top journals in a particular field if you conduct a search like this. And we're trying to help students realize to become more savvy with the internet. So we're not trying to tell them to completely dismiss internet research, but to really hone in on, they can really get trustworthy, high quality, peer-reviewed information from a scholarly journal. And so we're trying to sort of wean them a little bit off of reliance totally and exclusively on the internet, which a lot of times we find undergrads, that's all they'll use, to using databases that the library provides, and what are those journals inside those databases. So from that starting point, then the students can visit those journals' websites. So a lot of times when I'm working with students at either the reference desk or one-on-one through appointments in my office, I start to also talk to them about how to navigate to a particular journal's website and to access the open access content that will oftentimes be provided for free from the journal, the publisher of that journal, usually just as easily just searching their webpage for that information. Then we talk about how to use our library's discovery layer to do a journal search, and to find out if that is available in full text or if it's only indexed. We also talk to them a little bit if they're running into a journal that's only indexed, how they can use our interlibrary loan system and things like that. And then we start to explore the individual databases to help them become more familiar with the holdings that we have at the database level. And I found a lot of times faculty and students have no idea that they can really dig into individuals' journals from the database themselves, from databases themselves. So here's an example of what I was talking about earlier, just a very simple Google search. This one was the best academic journals for oncology. And this is the display that Google will put up, just a nice gridded list where you can expand out and get some more information. You can link right to that particular journal's website. But we're starting, and I find it's best to start with them at the title level to drill into a particular article, starting from the title of the publication it came from. Again, with the intention of helping them really get familiar with what are the really good research journals for my field. And then this is an example of where I pulled from that list a publication called Molecular Cancer, and then we just went right to their website to start drilling into some open access content. Here's another example, top journals in business, using Harvard Business Review from that list as an example. This is a screenshot of our discovery layer where students can then click on publications and drill into, does Utah Tech University Library offer the Harvard Business Review? And then of course they can see a display linking them to the access and what coverage we have. But walking students through this is extremely helpful. And after they leave the librarians, after we've talked to them, they're so relieved, because a lot of times they don't have this foundational knowledge in place. And once they do, it's really rewarding, because then they're off and going, they're off and running, and they're good to go. But a lot of them just come from high school not really understanding a lot of this. Here's where we drilled it further into Harvard Business Review as an example in our discovery layer, where now they're starting to see individual articles. And again, helping them understand that, hey, this publication lives within a database and you're accessing articles that are in a journal that's in a database. Another feature that I oftentimes find students are not aware of, and a lot of times our faculty are not aware of this either, but a tool that's extremely useful and powerful, again, is you're starting to have a student learn key publications in their field, where databases will oftentimes, most of them that I've worked with, all the ones that we have, or a great majority of them, have some kind of navigation menu option for the publications that are housed in that particular journal. So this is an example of CINAHL Complete, where you can use that publication button and then search for a particular journal that you're looking for. You can either do it alphabetically with the alphabetical options in this particular example, or just type in the title. So again, helping them realize, now I know where that journal's website is. I can go there for some content. I know the database now that has that journal, so I can keep going back to that one if I need to. Here's another screenshot example, again, where you can use that publication or list of publications. And oftentimes databases have really nice ways of searching for the publications that are housed in that database. All right, we'll turn it back over to Meg.
Thank you, John. That was very informative. And next up is Andrew Walsh to discuss how he teaches information literacy by showing researchers how to evaluate sources for credibility and authority. Andrew?
All right, thank you, Meg and John. So again, I'm going to be discussing information literacy at the article or individual source level, and I'm going to focus a little bit more on some conceptual frameworks for evaluating source credibility. We're going to apply them to both web and database sources, and then I'm going to just generally share some strategies that I found to be particularly useful for teaching how to evaluate sources in this age of misinformation and fake news. So for my institutional context, I am at Sinclair Community College, which is a large urban community college in Dayton, Ohio. And we're a very large student population and comparatively kind of smaller library staff. So we all do a little bit of everything. And my position has a major instructional focus. So I'm very often asked to teach students how to find sources, but then also how to evaluate those sources and ensure that they are credible. So my sessions include a lot of instruction on the mechanics and features of our different databases, but I always try to make sure that I'm connecting some of those features to more important overall concepts of information literacy. So I think the book that's displayed on the right side of this slide kind of sums up that concept really well. So how do we get students to kind of think more broadly about information? And with that, you can go out there and find a lot of examples for how to evaluate sources from most libraries. And very often you'll find that it sort of gets framed as Google versus the library. And it's kind of implied that you don't need to evaluate library sources because someone else has already done that. So they're all kind of automatically credible. But obviously, as we would know, shouldn't database sources need some evaluation as well? And then how do we particularly frame that for students? So there are some formal methods for evaluating sources of all types. And one of the more memorable versions of those has the catchy name of the CRAP test. And there we go. To the next slide. So that is, and there's many variants of this, but basically boils down to a variety of elements of that source to look into. So for the CRAP test, that stands for currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. So currency would stand for the timeliness of the information. Relevance would be how suitable or important that information is for your own needs. Authority is really, I would say, the most important, especially in this type of instruction. So that's the source of the information, both the individual author, but also the publisher, organization, or website that's responsible for that content. Accuracy, how correct is that information, whether it has citations backed up by facts. And then the purpose would be the information and it's the reason it exists, whether that be to sell or persuade or inform or entertain or anything in between. So these are concepts that kind of most frequently get discussed in the context of web sources, but they can also be evaluated within databases. So I have some examples of that that I work with students to identify some of those different facets you often get for filtering search results. So we have things like peer-reviewed checkboxes, which can be an aspect of authority. A source type limiter certainly also, has a little bit of authority to it, but I would argue that might even be more purpose. So what are those different source types? What are their different goals and audiences and things like that? And of course, currency would be another one that we often, students might have specific requirements for their assignment for the currency. So that is one thing we can see. And then when we continue to look at some other areas of these database search results, relevance is really a huge part of my instruction. So students often struggle to find articles that are really at the right level for them and related to what they want to say about their topic. So for example, this result shows some articles that come up for a search on artificial intelligence. And when I work with first-year students, often they want to talk about things like how AI might affect society or jobs and employment. So if we look at these kind of very specific scholarly articles, those aren't probably going to be too relevant for those needs. So with our subject terms and some of the other limiters, those can often be ways to narrow that down. And occasionally it may even be the case that those limits come too late and relevance really relies on what keywords you chose at the outset. So I sometimes will, do keyword brainstorming exercises and also taking advantage of some of the really often useful auto-suggest features that most of the databases have now to kind of help students brainstorm at the beginning so they can ensure that they're finding relevant articles. So if I focus on just one article, we will find some other examples of where we can find some of these markers of the CRAP test. So on an article details page, you can point out the authors, the source, as far as the journal that it came from, other markers of authority. It'll show their actual affiliations. So that's something we often highlight for students. And then the abstract is going to be kind of the student's best friend as far as measuring the relevance and whether that really matches up to what they were looking for or not. Now, accuracy is one we hadn't talked about so much, and that's really best found in the full text itself. So that's often one that they'll have to look at the full article to really ascertain. And I'll mention, especially on this example, anything about artificial intelligence. And when we go back to currency, most commonly, I'll see assignments where it's just like a 5-year limit. And when we think about a topic like AI, anything that is kind of pre-ChatGPT in late 2022 or whenever it came out, that probably isn't going to pass the currency test, even if it's within that kind of arbitrary 5-year limit. So I think that really speaks to the importance of the individual context of a specific topic or a specific source, and how some of those rules aren't always applied the same way. All right, so now we've found this great method that works for databases and the web, so we're all done, right? Well, not quite so fast. So in recent years, especially, a lot of librarians have kind of pushed back on the CRAP test and similar methods like that. One reason being that it's often not very realistic. So if you actually go to see the full kind of version of the CRAP test and how to teach it, it basically results in a lot of questions for students to ask of each source they might use. Currency, authority, all of those would have 5 or 6 questions. And I've kind of gone over these methods in classes with students, and they've kind of seemed to think that it's a useful method. And then I'll just ask the class, how many of you are actually going to do this? And generally, almost nobody says they will, because it's just not that realistic when you're just having sources come at you, or seeing so much information for any search. It's kind of a lot of work. And at the end of the day, even if you went through that huge list of yes or no questions about a website, it's sometimes unclear what your ultimate evaluation even should be. Like, say you got 15 yeses and 12 nos on an article. Does that mean it's good or bad? So basically, even though a lot of these methods are useful, there's a lot of research coming out to show that solely relying on methods like the CRAP test don't really work on their own, and specifically that they fail in our current web environment with much more sophisticated misinformation. So this up here on this slide is a major study which helped inspire some new methods to be adopted in information literacy instruction. And one of those specifically is lateral reading, which basically means kind of how fact checkers operate. So it's not looking all around the source or website itself to answer questions about it, but it's instead immediately leaving that website and verifying it using other sources. So this is a crucial concept to add to our toolbox. And we'll see that, like the CRAP test, this is not only something you can use with evaluating web sources, but also with sources you find from databases. So this idea of lateral reading appears prominently in some kind of newer methods that are emerging in the information literacy instruction world. And one of those is known as the SIFT approach. And on the one hand, this may look similar to the CRAP test. So it has an acronym, which stands for particular things to evaluate about sources, but there are some crucial differences. So it's not a long list of things to check or look for, but rather a much shorter list of things to actually do, or we can think of it as habits. So this results in some slightly different evaluation approaches. So for one of those elements, investigating the source or author, here's an example where we might see something on a social network, just an article, and then if we sort of went through the evaluating of that article itself, we might not come away with the conclusion that we would if we just stepped out of that source. And Google and Wikipedia are kind of our best friends for finding information about that specific source. And in this example, we find that this is really a government propaganda outlet. And then it's interesting, again, to take those methods and sort of see how do they play out in library databases. So this is just one example that that sort of illustrates when some of our simplistic, like library versus internet, good versus bad source distinctions sort of fall apart. So say you have an English class doing an argument essay, picking controversial topics. So for all of those, you'll get In some of those controversial issues style databases, you'll see sources like this. So which out of these two articles would be true or more authoritative? They argue the exact opposite. So the CRAP test may also fall short if we just read those articles themselves. So, we can say things like library sources are edited, published, and fact-checked. But when you get two articles like this, how would you pick, which one of those is better than the other? So we might instead look out and see where those articles were published and how that may have affected their point of view and the arguments that they're making. So let's do that with another example. And I pulled this article up specifically because I thought it was very controversial, and some would maybe argue even dangerous to be out there. But we'll use it to show how we can figure out a little bit more about the point of view of this source and how we should interpret it. So you can click on the source typically in any database, and it'll take you to a page with more information about that source, kind of relating to some of what John's section was talking about. But in this case, what I'm discussing as far as evaluation, part of the SIFT method, the founder of that says to just add Wikipedia. So basically you take out that URL and just append the keyword Wikipedia to a Google search. And that does a pretty good job of just pulling up the article for that specific source. And in this case, we can sort of see what is that source in terms of whether it's mainstream or highly partisan or kind of a fringe or hate group or anything that we might find. And I want to then do another example of this with another article just to illustrate that this isn't just about left versus right politics, which I think some of these evaluation methods sometimes get boiled down to. So this is an example of an article about milk. And when we do that just add Wikipedia trick and we come up with the article, we would find out that website is associated with the Got Milk campaign. So it's basically funded by the industry. So the really important takeaway from this type of evaluation is not that we're saying that article is bad or it's full of lies, and that milk article actually cites research articles for the points it makes. But the big takeaway is that it's never going to aim to present both sides of the story. So that is really the crucial skill here, because you really need to know a source's point of view and potential biases before you react to it or interpret what it says. So just very quickly, some examples of the other methods in SIFT. So sometimes tracing a claim to the original source is as easy as clicking a link in a more popular source to get to a scholarly article. We can also do that with database articles. For example, this was one where there was a recent bill here in Ohio that was going to potentially affect a lot of elements of education. And using that, you can go out and actually examine the original bill itself. For finding better coverage, if we see an article with kind of a sensational claim, we could spend a whole lot of time evaluating that article in the context of the CRAP test, or we could just quickly take the main claim that it makes and search that to see if maybe we can find better coverage from a more trusted source to kind of skip all the time we would take and ultimately not even be sure if we should trust that or not. Again, we can use that in terms of library databases. So specifically, we could take a more opinionated article and try to find something a little more measured. But then in this example, in this screenshot, very often we can find something like a research starter, or in some of the reference databases, kind of more general background articles. And we could use those to jump out into scholarly articles that students would then be able to cite directly. So kind of summing this up, should we ditch the CRAP test totally? I think some librarians say yes. I wouldn't necessarily go that far, but I do think we need to tweak how it's taught. So for authority, that might mean remembering to go beyond the website itself and using Google or Wikipedia to learn more about the source, and ultimately really making it more about habits, not lengthy checklists, and really know what you're reading. So just a couple of examples where we could even go deeper with some of these concepts. So we sometimes think of things like a peer-reviewed checkbox as just an easy way to say, yes, this is the perfect source, but are there any issues with doing that? I think one example could be the fact that obviously there's lots of predatory journals out there that are sometimes sneaking into databases. They would still come up as peer-reviewed sources. And then there also may be issues with diversity in the scholarly conversation. And then in more upper division classes, we can talk about some of those issues. And here's another example of how we could even use our instruction to empower students to critique peer-reviewed studies on their own. So not just that it is peer-reviewed, but the quality of its evidence. So this often is what I do in some of the health sciences courses I work with. And you may think of that as something that you would be doing at the graduate level, but we're doing that in associate's programs at my community college. So these frameworks can really be applied in a wide variety of different contexts. So with that, I will pass it back to Meg.
Thank you, Andrew, for your insights and ideas. As we heard from both John and Andrew, finding trustworthy content is essential for building information literacy and for conducting successful research. Another important element includes the best practices of information aggregators. When libraries are searching for vendors of full-text databases, they should look for a few key elements that consider the who, what, and where of aggregated content. The who are the information custodians. They are subject matter experts, and information aggregators should employ them for their vast experience as librarians, researchers, and editors. They know the best journals in each field, and they monitor predatory publisher lists to weed out any journals that could corrupt research. The what is the content. Journals that are featured in leading subject indexes such as Scopus, Web of Science, PubMed, ERIC, and others should be available for researchers. And high-quality journals with the highest ranking and highest impact factors should be included. This ensures that researchers will get the most accurate and current results. The where is the global landscape. Content from all over the world provides researchers with international perspectives. It helps to broaden their understanding of diverse issues within the context of different cultures, and it enhances their critical thinking skills. We hope you enjoyed our presentation and now feel even more empowered to build information literacy in your library. Thank you.